Hi everyone, welcome to our room. Thank you. We wanted to do it on page at Ribea, but we are going to share the video with everyone. So where we are at this season is the marriage vow. So we have started the season amazingly on our relationship talk, discussing what the fruit of our relationship. And when we want to complete this year's discussion, we are going to complete it in the month of October with the marriage vow discussion that we are starting now in the month of September. And while we are in that, that is our requirement to nurture, right? Our requirement to look at the vow of man and woman, the vow of familyness in humanity, the vow of the differences that marriage has changed into, the vow that are meant to remain sacred no matter how challenging the marriage has become. Today we look at a generation that intermarried man and woman, and we look at a generation that had to accept and appreciate the sacredness, the pureness we have discussed last year of the marriage vow itself. And therefore, I want to just explain today that we are in a generation where the woman parents in the womb of the woman. And the woman that parents represents that is the birth womb of mankind. That is where man, woman derives from. That is that the man in the womb represents from the womb itself. And that is the woman that gives birth, find herself educating and parenting exactly from that. That is the right, and the right that she has been granted to give birth in a season. And therefore, what our marriage vow discussing today, we want to start with that. That is the vineyard and the relationship itself. That is that education that we have started with in the month of August, that we started, the month of July, August, that we started with the vine itself that are tasted within the most purest wines, right? That is that when someone wants to enjoy the grapes in a season, they want to enjoy the sweetness of the grape. When someone wants to enjoy the glass of white wine, the glass of red wine in season, they want to enjoy it with a taste that is fine for them in a season. It is that we have learned that with the wine itself, that the taste in season differs, right? The emotions are sometimes different to the one season to the other. The way that we expect our wine when it's presented to us are sometimes different the one season than it is the next season. And therefore, when we are in a season representing from our birth womb and representing that is sacred to the birth womb, we accept sacredness in the completeness of how our generation are educated. That Ribea Elise has 18 years of marriage this year with Dorian Rhoda, and the marriage has been somewhat so, and the marriage finds itself in that there is the tasty wine, and there is the wine that Ribea in some seasons said that today I like a glass of red wine, and the next day I do not want to look at red wine, and then I get a headache with the red wine, and such is a generation season. But the requirement for a generation to listen to that is the marriage vow itself, the sacredness of that. My brothers educated in their life choices and in how firm they are with relationships and in how they really are that they really appreciated their Mama Anna's education and parenting, and they sometimes just want that in the wife. And they sometimes affirm to that it is that they do not want their wife to be exactly like their mama, no, but it is they were educated about the sacredness of the marriage vow, and they really, really appreciated that, and they really sometimes want to hold on to that exactly. It is that sometimes sacred to us means that it needs to look in a certain way. And Ribea's dress, I wanted to wear another dress today, and you know what? Something told me, you know what? Go and change and wear your marriage vow dress. And that represents exactly where we are at in our season, because I know you want to wear this, but it's really the reminder of that sacredness of the marriage vow that sometimes present how it wants to present, but it is really season that we make sometimes. That is that you cannot say that nothing is wrong and nothing is right about it. Mankind sometimes says, but this is wrong and this is right. And we have learned that the sacredness of that is holding on to the education that you have learned in the generational season, and to exactly represent that. And that's where we are at with that. With opening today's discussion, we want to start with that we have mentioned last week, and that we have mentioned the month before. That is last month and the month before, the fruits of our relationship, right? The vine that are tasted with eating the grapes. I've mentioned before, the vine reminds us of the dryness, right? In the grapes sometimes, that you decide to have certain grapes, and you can sometimes taste the dryness of the vine that are tasteless, but you can taste in the grapes sometimes. The grapes that are tasted with appreciating the most flavoring of seasons, in the most flavoring of wine in season, and the most flavoring wine that are sometimes different in seasons, and that the season appear with that, that is the loudness. That some people sometimes questions what Ribea says when I educate, and then they sometimes leave it at that, and they sometimes just allow themselves to listen to the complete season about educate, because the loudness in the season is not necessarily that the summer season is loud, or that the autumn season is loud, or that the spring season is loud. It is listening to that, that is you in a season, that is what I presented to you in a season. And when you listen to that, that is you, that you listen in the quietness within yourself, that how you are introduced yourself in a season. Then Ribea says you are sometimes introduced in such loudness that you sometimes have to hold on to that, and that's the sacredness of the marriage vow. And that's where we want to be at today. What we want to remind our listeners of today is the fact that the vine, right? The vine that we sometimes look at on the vineyard. And then my brothers would exactly say that when the vine looks like this, we exactly know how the season is going to be, Ribea. And don't do this by the vineyard, and don't do that by the vineyard. And the vineyard is in front of our yard, right? It is such a little vineyard that you just call it a home, and you make it home, right? And then my brothers comes every season and every year to come and check sometimes how the vineyard is looking in front of the house, right? And how everyone has nurtured the vineyard. And then then we would stand in front of the house, and the one would argue with the other one and said, have you all not nurtured the vineyard this year? Have you all not made sure that the grapes come out fine this year? And then I stand and I listen to them, and how firm they are with the education and the sacredness and the pureness that is the marriage vow itself. And sometimes to human beings, it looks like pureness is going to be that is the perfect marriage, and nothing has gone wrong, and no one has said wrong, and no one has done wrong. But it is exactly that the man does not give up on his woman, the woman does not give up on a man. The relationship is exactly that, and you hold on to that, that keeps it that is a vow between man and woman. And it is not that you hold on in difficult times, no, because we educate in our education rooms, that difficult times are that when you feel endangered, then you know how to be protective to you know how to be protective to your woman. But our generation has learned to so easily give up, because everyone wants to shift and say the marriage vow the way they want to, and everyone wants to have it be the way they want to. And we have been firmly and directly educated that the sacredness of that is that with the challenge at hand, we learn to listen to that. That is the marriage itself. That is man and woman on earth together, and the earth look destructed and destroyed, but they hold on to that. That is the familyness of a generation. And that is what our household has been educated in season. Wood holding on to that is the vine itself. You look at the vine, and the vine to a generation seems tasteless, right? The vine to a generation, when we look at the vine at the vineyard, it looks like just something that's part of the season of the amazing grape itself. But listening to that is acceptance, is really listening to that, that is appreciation with where we are at in appreciating the completeness of our fruit season. when we appreciate the completeness of our fruit season, we learn to listen to that. That is when you're reminded of the grapes that has its complete season, and that the vineyard has been nurtured in a way that everyone has learned to be excited and to appreciate every type of season of the grapes. And when you expect that season of the grapes to be in that, and that has had a complete nurturing season, and then you expect exactly the grapes to taste like that. And sometimes when the grapes doesn't taste like that, and then we get angry, we get aggressive, we get abusive, because our parents have taught us that the marriage should be exactly that. The parents have taught us that our marriages was 20 years and 30 years and 50 years. The parents have taught us that when the husband went and he had an affair, then the wife did not give up on the husband and she stayed in the marriage. We find ourselves in a different generation. And the grapes that are tasted in that are us appreciating the flavor of our seasons, right? When we appreciate the flavor of our seasons, Ribea Elise educates that we then do not give up on ourselves in a relationship. We had our relationship podcast, right? In the last year, in our relationship podcast exactly educated the completeness of what we are discussing this year. And our relationship podcast educates that you do not give up on yourself in your relationship, that you hold on to self in order to learn how to appreciate someone else, that when self feels disrespected, you learn to listen to what are your required response having to be, then having to find yourself in that self are sometimes abused in relationship, because self thought that relationship was exactly that had to be accepted the whole time, without realizing that self had to be accepted in the season that we find ourselves at. And that is where we have to listen to, and we have to learn to appreciate that. That is a complete acceptance of where we find ourselves at. That is that self requires self. Your individual reaction is that you require yourself to be appreciated, that you require you to appreciate yourself. And when you appreciate yourself, you exactly know how to reason when relationships sometimes are different, when relationships sometimes have its different seasons, when relationship sometimes requires you to learn to the loudness of a spring season, or the loudness of a summer season, or the loudness of an autumn season, when you realize that winter season's loudness is exactly clear, that the raindrops fall, and you can sometimes hear it falling on your roof, and you can sometimes hear the emotional connection that you have to the season itself. And in the same way, we need to learn to listen to our relationship seasons. That is in the quietness of a spring season, in the quietness of a summer season, in the appearance of a spring blossoming in a spring season, and in the amazing autumn leaves, or the tree that might seem like the tree standing there empty, and the tree doesn't matter. The amazingness is that the loudness of how we listen to respond to that is you in your season. And that is where we are required to be in our seasons. We are required to accept the most flavoring seasons that are sometimes going to be different. That sometimes are explained in a way that it says that spring season is loud, but the blossoming is exactly that you are required to listen in loudness to your season. The summer season sometimes gets so loud that you can feel the hotness of that, and your requirement in relationship, or where you find yourself at being a human being on earth, is to listen to that. That is the hotness in your summer season. The autumn season's loudness are that the autumn leaves are everywhere, and everyone says, just take the leaves out of the house, it's on the ground and on the floor the whole time. And the loudness of that is realizing and looking at the leaves and accepting it completely, that is the loud voice of the autumn season. And so we learn to listen to that while educated in a winter season on how to listen to the loudness of our seasons. Therefore, we want our listeners to exactly be at that. That is the marriage vow itself. That is, we educate opportunity of choice in all the different functions of educating and ways of explanation. And we educate in the marriage vow that our opportunity of choice is that is non-disrespective, once again, to yourself and to the partner, non-disrespective to yourself, and once again to your relationship itself, and non-disrespective to the familyness, the education of family. We know that sometimes our parents want us to exactly have the 40 years marriage and to exactly have that and to exactly have that. And we have been educated to hold on to that. But our parents also want their children to exactly be fine and to appreciate the completeness of every season a generation are being granted to appreciate. And that's where we are having to find ourselves in the listening to our loud seasons with our relations of education. Another thing that we're going to discuss now with the marriage vow in a few seconds is that the marriage vow, that is the parental education, right? The household education of where both marriage partners grew up at. And with our household has been different, right? And when our household has been different and has changed, and the seasons for our family have changed, I've mentioned it on one of the podcasts on how our family season has changed when our papa was not in the house anymore. And while our papa was not there, it was challenging, most challenging for the 4 men in the house, and it was for the women in the house, right? For Ribea, Elise was not so challenged, but Mama Anna had to go on and work for us, and some of the boys had to leave school to go and be employed so that the household can be fine. Because the household has found themselves those years. I was not born those years. So the household those years, the boys said, had everything it required. It had the blossoming garden. The community said that the blossoming garden was there, and it was nice for them to come on a Saturday to our mama and our papa's house, and they were listening to the amazing music, and they were having discussions, and our mama's garden was amazingly blossomed because her mama was a garden mama. She used to love a garden, her parenting, her nurturingness of her children, right? And then the aunties used to tell Ribea, Elise, when I was in South Africa in 2020 and 2018, then the aunties say, it was always nice to be at y'all's family house on a Saturday. And those years they were staying by the Quaker farm where there's lots of nice gardens and everything, and by Paul Mountain, right? And then the community, they were staying by both mountains, right? So they were first staying by the Booster Mountain of Paul, when they moved into Paul, and then they moved to the Paul Mountain, and then they moved into the center of Paul community, right? Chicago, yeah. So then they used to have everything, and the young boys were the 4 boys, right? And they had everything, and their papa worked for them, and their papa gave them everything that they required, right? And the mama, my mama Anna, the boys said, had everything. And then our papa went ill, and they had to move from the education of family and of parenting, and it shifted for them in an immediate season, and they had to move into a community where there was not only 2 bedrooms, because there was 3 bedrooms, and then there was for everyone an amazing place to sleep. And then we had to move into a house that now is in a flat and that now only had 2 bedrooms, and the boys found it challenging, and the boys cried and said, but where is our papa? And our papa was not there anymore. And it was challenging for Mama Anna, it was challenging for the boys, and the circumstances at hand had the boys being firm on that. That is the sacredness of the marriage vow that they were educated when they were young. I remember my brother Anton and his wife, yes, they divorced because also of the sacredness of that. Because the divorce is never that is disappointing for the marriage itself. It is that appreciation and respect for the marriage vow and for the education that the family had. It is once the marriage got challenging, it was fine for both partners to say, but I would not want to disrespect my mama's education. His wife also grew up in a farm and also in the nature education of that. And the firmness of her response to that and his response to that is that the sacredness of the marriage vow is that sometimes men and women sometimes divorce, not to abuse the marriage, but for the sacred of that. And when Brother Anton and his wife divorced, he was a little bit disappointed because my mama was very excited when her baby boy got married, right? And then my mama was not there anymore, and they divorced because it was challenging for him to have lost his mama, and his mama wasn't so excited on the wedding. And what is all the education about? Because in the one season, the season looked like a blossoming, in the next season, the season changed once again, and they were challenged with that. And the sacredness of them was having to divorce one another rather than being in marriage angry, right? And sometimes in our lives, we have to be firm and direct with reprimanding, but also firm and direct with making decisions that is keeping the sacredness of the marriage vow sacred. It is that we can look at circumstances in the world and tell ourselves that the world is exactly like marriage vow. We sometimes need to listen to that. That is an opportunity that life gives you to listen to that. That is not a threat that life gives you, mankind. No, it is an opportunity of choice in the marriage vow. Exactly becomes that the way you would reason in your daily life is that you normally, I find myself 40 years old and having to go from or being born until 40 years old this year is exactly the opportunity of choices that we have made in our daily lives. It's exactly that has had us be fine with where we are at in our seasons and with holding on to those decisions. And those decisions are sometimes how we reason when we are challenged in marriages. It is the exact same way of reasoning that when you find yourself challenged, you were brought up in a way that you have learned to listen to how you reason and how you make constructive decisions with where you are at. And when you are required to decide upon a marriage, you exactly do that you have done throughout your years that had you be fine with where you are at in your decision making. It is that we do not say to people, don't change your ways of reasoning. No, it is that everyone knows themselves. Everyone knows the households that they were brought up in. Everyone knows whether they can be difficult, the one sometimes with the other. Everyone knows how reprimandative they can be. Everyone knows whether they were living a drunken lifestyle or they had drunken way of reasonings, because it's not necessarily a drunken lifestyle that's going to have you being drunken where you are at. It is the way of reasoning sometimes and how you would reason in circumstances. That is exactly the opportunity of choice that life educates us, that you hold on to that. And that is the marriage vow itself. And that is when women had to reason and say, but I have found myself in my upbringing like this, but my marriage circumstances are that. If it's an endangered environment, we learn, then you allow yourself to get distracted from that. That is the marriage itself. When sometimes there's financial circumstances, like with Ribea, Elise, I always say that about business funding need to be right, because when Ribea, Elise decides she wants to move out, then the finances should be there. When Ribea, Elise finds that the marriage is so challenged that it seems like husband and wife now is now definitely really now having to go different ways, because such is the marriage vow, such is the relationship of marriage, right? It is that Ribea calls on our seasons podcast, I call it the newness of our generation. And I say that on the newness of our generation, when your marriage vow has become nude and someone else might require you to intermarry with them, we learn then God has granted that. That is divorces in the marriage season, because God requires mankind to respond differently and to be there, the one for the other. Like God said, the queen and the seed, and the husband had to decide, and the queen had to decide what husband to choose for herself. And so God has said the king and the seed, and the king decides what wife he chooses for himself in any season, and the king decides when he wants a different wife. And so the queen has the right to decide when she wants a different husband, because such is the marriage vow of mankind. That is that you do not hold on to someone that maybe are meant to go and maybe find themselves in another parenting room of the marriage vow between mankind. It is that mankind has been educated, and that the marriage vow can shift from one wife to the next wife, from one husband to the next husband. And so the marriage vow has been shifted also, man and woman and woman. But the requirement of that is that we make choices that are fine for ourselves in our seasons. Another thing that I want to discuss with the opportunity of choice and the sacredness of the vow itself, right? It is that when we allow ourselves to listen to that we are required to respond to in the marriage itself. When we allow ourselves to listen to the environment of the marriage itself. We have mentioned that in the loudness of its seasons, the season appear in quietness, but the loudness is how we sometimes listen and how we sometimes look and how it's sometimes presented to us. And then we exactly accept that. That is how you would respond to where you are required to respond to in your season. It is that for our generation we find it challenging to have learned men and women and women. But for a generation of people in our humanity on earth to learn that there is acceptance of how the universe and how the womb of the universe educates the womb itself, then it is mankind not disregarding themselves when the womb educates the womb itself. It is that for our household educations, it is good to hold on to that, Ribea says, but to allow ourselves to have that is the open-mindedness when the womb educates us differently. It is not that the team of people in the world that now goes to decide to go and fight the LGBT people. No, it is that when Ribea learned that the world is LGBT, then I found it challenging myself. And I had to respond to that. That is fine for me and for my household and for my children. But how these seasons in this world is that the womb educates that, and there's children that accept that really wants to listen to that. That is the complete womb education in a season. And therefore, it should not be fine for a generation to challenge themselves more when they learn that the womb is shouting and the womb is loud and the womb is requiring mankind to react for that. That is, how does mankind listen and how does mankind respond to that? That is the womb itself. And when we learn to respond with that is the womb itself, then we learn to look at the grapes in a different way. Because many times the grapes came forth and the grapes seemed like we got aggressive because we want every grape on that piece of grapes, to be perfect, right? And we used to call it a truss of grapes. We want every grape on the truss of grapes to be perfect, right? Every grape has to taste sweet. And then we get one piece of grape after we had the whole truss of grapes, and then it was not as sweet as we sometimes require it to be. And then we sometimes get angry. But we need to learn that the fruitness of that, the nurturingness of that, the way it's presented is the completeness of how we accept and appreciate that we are being presented in our seasons. And therefore, our respond in a relationship is exactly that. That is a respond of relationship vows that became sacred between man and woman, between man and man, between woman and woman, between mankind itself, between the mothers, the fathers, the children on earth, and between that the universe and all the colors in the universe educates humanity on earth. And that's amazing. Another thing that we then want to conclude the marriage vow discussion, right? I've listened to my old music, and sometimes we want to add music to our relationship discussions. And I've listened to music that really brought me through when I was a young girl. And when we learned the different musics that we are introduced to, we learn to listen in that is our choices that we make, right? And when we learn to listen to that, we hold on to the music that sounds fine for us. And that's exactly opportunity of choice, right? It is that feels fine for you. And when you listen to the music and your friends say, oh, this is their favorite type of music, then Ribea Elise listens to that. And that is exactly her favorite type of music, right? And then Ribea Elise puts the music in the jukebox. And when I put the music in my money in the jukebox, I exactly press my favorite song. And I can remember those years. Then we walked to the game center. Now, the game center was someone else's house, right? A mama that parented young children. And the mama and the papa is not there anymore, but the house is still there, and the children are still there. And we had amazing education by the house. And I remember every time we walked to the game center, and you enter the game center, you walk, you talk, your attitude, right? And we enter the game center, and every time we entered onto Veronica's game center, then one of the friends would put the music sound on, and you listen exactly to what someone else appreciates in the season. And then you go in and you think, sometimes you go in and you start to dance when you enter the game center. Other times it's not your favorite song and you won't dance on it. And everyone learns to notice everyone like that. And we sometimes learn to respond to the other's music, type of music. And my type of music was exactly Usher, those years in Brian McKnight. I didn't even know it was Brian McKnight until recently when I started to dance on the song. And then I looked and then they said, no, Brian McKnight is singing that. And then I said, all these years I was dancing on it also, and I thought it was only Usher, 6, 8, 12, right? And I was all these years dancing on it. And all these years I only thought that Usher was my main relationship music guy, right? And that you appreciate that season of music with. And I then were introduced in New Zealand, and then I actually danced on Brian McKnight's music. And I all these years thought it was only us. So when someone asked me, who's your favorite artist? It's only us's music. And I go into the jukebox and I only put the music on, right? And that's the amazingness of dancing in the vineyard, right? And sometimes dancing in the vineyard can be crazy. Sometimes dancing in the vineyard can be so much that is happening. And I was so much drunk those years when I was dancing, because the game center, we could drink there, we could have alcohol there, we could enjoy our young days there. And we only went to areas where we went to family, and where we will be fine when we go out, right? And that's how our friends always used to grow up. We didn't go to places where there's now no family there. We would only dance at places, or we go to the dance club where there's family. We went to Wellington. One of my family's friends always in Wellington, and there was a dance club, Club Nouveau. And I remember we got into Club Nouveau and everyone says, oh, are you Ribea? Everyone in the world is talking about a Ribea. Who's this Ribea that keeps herself so quiet? So quiet was now. And we were young at that time. And I looked and I said, oh, they talk so far about me. Anyway, and then they say, oh, but leave Ribea. Ribea that doesn't look like a difficult person. And so this woman, you know, we were sometimes introduced to one another in the funniest ways. That someone went to say stories around the world, but we were there and we could enjoy their Wellington dance environment. And I remember us going to the end of term of Policy Bed Secondary School, right? And I remember when we were every year, when the school completed, and we were in secondary school, New Orleans Secondary, and Policy Secondary always at the end of term, and I went with one of my friends always there. And then we were introduced to the music while we were young, and to the dance club, before we would now officially go to dance clubs. And when we went to the Wellington Dance Club, we would always go. There was times that the dance club opens, it was a preparation for when you are older, and when you start the dance club when you are a teenager, and that is just for the during day dance club. And then by the evening time, when everyone else comes to the dance, then all the secondary school children have to be out of the dance, and then it's now time for the older people. And such is the Marriage Vow educated in that. That is that our community then finds themselves fine, because the children are educated fine. The music came from America to South Africa, fine. South Africa introduced it in their communities, and they educated us through on the dance environment. And when we would enjoy a glass of alcohol, and then you learn how you would react when you are drunk, right? Because you now have an opportunity to only be amongst your friends, and no one over the age of 18 years old, only under 18 years old, from 16 to 18 years old. And all of those educations, and the secondary school teachers knows exactly who's the children, and that is now in primary school. And then we would enjoy the medley and at Club Nouveau, and we would enjoy the end of terms of the school terms that completed. And then they had the dance for us, and we were introduced to go to the dance. We would get drunk in the medley, so you learn how you would react. And that's what we want to discuss with you. It is that education, I know I say a lot, but it is that education that takes us somewhere. It starts at the game center, and it goes to the medley dance, and the medley dance is called, it's from 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and it's until 5 p.m. and then the dance is out for the secondary school children, and then the older school children can enjoy the dance after that. And we were educated in the end of terms of every school had an end of term season. And not every school, but Policy Bear, those years had an end of term dance. And by June month, before school vacation, then the dance is on, and then you can have and enjoy a glass of wine, and you realize how drunk you can get, and you realize how you can dance and who's around you, and you were then educated on how to be when you go to a dance club when you are now older. And then after that, I went to Club Valerie's, right, and then at the hotel lifestyle. And then I was now really educated on where to be at, being around people that are introduced to me and that know me exactly, and only be with people that knows you exactly, right? And that is how the parents of our community educated us those years. And that is what we call the sacredness of the marriage vow. That we sometimes have so much differences and arguments, but to hold on to those educations as a community and as countries in general. When the music was introduced to South Africa, the South African young people embraced that exactly. The parents educated that to us exactly, and we were able to know how to reason under circumstances that might be challenging. And that is where we want to be at with that. That is the food that are presented when we appreciate the completeness of our seasons. And that is that so many musicians, Boys to Men, Brian McKnight, Asha is still in music. Yes, we don't see a lot of Boys to Men, but we are still in the same educative season. And remember, when we find ourselves still in the educative season, then we still want to be presented that music. It's like someone we were educated under athletic field, right? Someone gives you that, and you run with that, and someone else runs with it. And our generation stays in that. That is the 100-year generation. That is families that remains on earth for 100 years without that is addressing the one the other. And such is our education with the music industries. And we would want to learn to know how to appreciate that in its completeness and how to hold on to that. That is the fruits that are presented while we educate. And the Celebrity House has educated all the countries with music, and they have not educated because they wanted countries to be drunk in music. It was that parents in countries have to educate, right? Because the Celebrity House exactly presented that is their music for us. And in that circumstance, we have to find ourselves fine. And we're really appreciative to that. And we really want to say thank you to the African American Celebrity House and the American Celebrity House for that. That is the music season in the sacred vow of the marriage itself. It is there that Ribea has held onto, and I still dance on it, and I still put the YouTube on, and I still put all my music on. It is when I listen to a song and it's not for me, then I put switch it off, and it's exactly that. That is the sacredness of the marriage vow that educates you on what's required for you in this season. That is it, everyone, and I love to say my music with everyone here. Sorry for the reels that I say the way that I say it, but we have to sometimes educate the way that we are required to educate. So I sent on a Sunday to you a video with a reel on, and how is it now? Ja Rule was also with me in the music when I was young. I always used to love Ja Rule song. So there's the slow music, and there was the Ja Rule music, right? And that Ja Rule song that I sing on, it is just that educates us something differently about the environment itself. It is not because Ja Rule is shouting and swearing because he's angry. No, it is the environment that educates us that South African people, this is the song, and that environment is around y'all. And then we have to be listening to that, we dance on it, and we exactly know how to reason about those seasons that men can find themselves at. And such is music, such is the Celebrity House, and such is the amazingness of humanity. And that's it, everyone, with our marriage vow. We discuss it again next month, and we allow ourselves to enjoy that. That is the appreciativeness of the nurturingness, the fruit season of our relationships. Have an amazing day further.